This is Mark Dell with Android Spin, and this review is for Worms by EA Mobile. There aren't many video game franchises that can trace their way all the way back to the Commodore Amiga like Worms can, which since its release in 1995 has appeared on just about every platform imaginable, including, finally, the Android platform. At the core of Worms is an artillery-style turn-based game, but rather than stationary tanks firing rockets and mortars, there are teams of worms flying around the randomly generated landscape on jetpacks, throwing banana bombs and explosive sheep. As your team can move around the map, there is a great deal of strategy that can be used beyond just practicing with weapons and judging power and wind. You'll want to make sure that the area that your worms are in is well sheltered away from areas where you can be knocked easily into the water or off the side of the screen, and you can get around slowly by crawling across the map, but there's also tools such as blowtorches to cut through the soil, girders to add additional objects to the terrain, and hookshots and parachutes. The weapon selection is diverse, and it creates for an equally diverse selection of tactics, meaning that some games can take a considerably long time if you and a friend are digging into the terrain and taking quick shots rather than running into the action. Playing with a friend has always been the best way to play Worms. The AI goes between making bonehead decisions to throwing a precision grenade at your feet at random, and the terribly unfortunate thing here is, unlike the Xbox arcade version Worms is based on, multiplayer is available as a hot seat play only, so you'll have to pass around your phone between turns. This is a real missed opportunity, as being able to play Worms online from anywhere alone could have made this the greatest game in the series, but without even a local wireless play, Worms is missing one of its best attributes. Even when creating a multiplayer game, the options presented to you are rather limited. There's no selecting teams, team size, custom loadouts or health. The controls in Worms are more critical to the action than your average turn-based game, as you'll only have so many seconds to make your turn. This prevents traversing the entire map to strike with the opposing team with a baseball bat, or whatever other weapon you should choose. There isn't a great deal of a problem with the controls for the large portion of the game, and they are generally intuitive, but there are times when you're trying to make some precise movements, and you'll end up losing a turn or a worm because things didn't work out quite the way they should. The ninja rope is perhaps one of the biggest troubles, as disembarking from the rope or extending it mid-swing is plagued by a troubling delay that makes the item almost unusable except for the most basic maneuvers. Other issues often arise when trying to pinch zoom or two-finger swipe across the map, as these actions are occasionally interpreted as moving your worm left or right. On a HD screen, Worms looks great. The action zooms out far enough so you can just make out the worms on the screen, and you can also zoom back in to show detail. The zooming is very helpful, but there are often times when you're being shown the action, and the screen will zoom in on the active worm or the weapon that's being fired, but won't zoom out to show the larger picture of the damage that's being caused. Such as a worm being knocked off the screen by dynamite, the screen will be focused on the explosion rather than its result. This seems like a minor point, but it can be very frustrating and unsatisfying when you've just landed that great shot and you don't get to see it as you should. The sound design is of the usual Worms standard. Each level has its own music track, and each team of worms can be customized to have their own selection of witty voices, giving the game a lot of character. The lack of effective multiplayer in Worms is a real downer, and the controls do have a tendency to be frustrating, but this is an otherwise fully functional Worms game that is quick to get in and out of if you have a few moments to spare, but it can also really snatch away some hours for you if you're not careful. If you've enjoyed the series before, or you're just looking for some bizarre and rather British style of humour, then you could do far worse than catching yourself worms.